my most amazing artists. Welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are going to be trying to make some air dry clay. There are a lot of different types of clay that you can try to make in your home, like salt dough or sugar dough. There are a lot of different versions of air dry clay. Some of them require flour, some of them require a lot of salt. What we're using today is a good bit of baking soda, cornstarch, and water. So I'll make sure that you have the recipe for this. And today we are going to incorporate 1 cup of baking soda in with a 1/4 cup of cornstarch and 3/4 cups of water. So let me show you how we do that. If you look here, you'll see I have a container of cornstarch. There's a couple ways that we can do this, but you always want to make sure that you're measuring accurately. So I'm going to scoop this out, but of course I won't want to leave it heaping up like that. I'm going to scrape it off against the side and make sure that I have a pretty accurate measurement. If you don't have something like a hard edge on your container, you could always use the back edge of a knife. It's really important that you get these measurements correct. So all of these ingredients that I have here are about to be combined into a pot on the stove. Now for this part, it's really important that you make sure you have an adult do this. This is not a step that I would think anyone should be ready to do in their home without adult supervision. So we're going to go ahead and take this over to the stove, and I'll show you what we do from there. Okay, students, so here I am over at my stove. I have a large pot here on my eye, and it is on high. In this pot, we are going to add in our ingredients. So I have a 1/4 cup of cornstarch, so that goes in. And then we have a cup of baking soda. And we have 3/4 cup of water. Now, we're going to add this in here, and immediately we're going to start to stir. This mixture, once it gets to boiling point, it's going to start to kind of bubble, and immediately you're going to see it's going to turn from this kind of thick, milky paste into like a really kind of drier mixture, and it's going to start to harden up immediately. So as soon as it reaches that boiling point, we're going to turn the heat all the way down to medium, and then we're just going to stir it for a few minutes until it seems like it's the consistency of clay or dough. You can see already it's starting to thicken up a lot. I'm just going to keep stirring it. I turn the heat down. It will want to stick to the bottom a little bit, but that's okay. Just keep stirring, and as long as you don't see it start to burn, everything should be fine. The reason I like this recipe better than some of the other recipes I've tried is I find it's a little bit more durable, and I like the texture of it in comparison to something made with flour. It doesn't seem to get as lumpy or as sticky. And like I said, this is an air dry clay. You can also bake it at your in your oven at a really low temperature if you want it to dry a little bit faster. I just like to let things kind of dry a little bit more naturally because I think it doesn't put as much stress on the clay. So you can see it's getting a little bit thicker now, and what we're going to do is we are going to let this cool off a little bit, and when it seems like it is cool enough to touch, so if I put my hand over it, I can tell obviously from the steam that it's really hot. But if you put your hand over it in about 5 minutes, just check and see if it's cool enough to touch, and if it is, then you'll be ready to put it in your bowl and do the next step. Okay, students, so I have go ahead and transferred that mixture from my pot into my bowl. I did that with a spoon. Just be very careful, it is hot. Again, wait till your parents say that it's ready for you to touch, and we will go ahead and do that. One thing I do want you to think about, though, is every once in a while, maybe come back and stir it with a spoon. This is air dry clay, so the surface is naturally going to want to draw a little moisture, and it's going to start to dry a little bit quicker than the inside will, so you want to watch for cracking. And if it feels like it's still a little bit too sticky, you can always come back and add just a little bit more baking soda. Add it just a little bit at a time, maybe like a teaspoon or a half a teaspoon amount, and then just stir that in. I'm actually just going to use a spoon right now because I notice it's still very, very hot. But I'm trying to get it to the texture that I'm used to with the clay in class. Or if you have Play-Doh at home, something closer to that. So if it still feels like it's a little too sticky, let it cool down. And then if you still think it needs more, then go ahead and add it after it's cool. But while it's warm, it might still stay just a little bit sticky. And then once it's completely cool, we can go ahead and work with it. So if you want to try this at home, I would really encourage you to dive in. This is a little bit of a messy project, so make sure you have permission and you have an adult's help. But again, you only need 3 things. You need water, you need baking soda, and you need cornstarch. So there are a lot of different recipes you can try, and I'll be sure to include those in with the link. Have fun. Happy making. So today we're going to try and make this beautiful air dry clay that we've made at home, and we're going to take it and we're going to change its color. So if you have food coloring in your home, or you have things like spices, or you have things like sugar-free Jell-O, you can use all those things to dye your clay. So we're going to talk about color mixing a little bit today, and that's just to review some of the things that we've talked about in our class. We are going to start by making a log. So I am going to make a large coil. When I say large, I mean it should be probably 1 inch to 2 inches thick. And if you do not know how to make a coil, you can ask for help, or you can go back and watch my video on the basic clay techniques. So we are going to take this and we're going to divide it into 6 pieces. Here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to try to find about halfway, and I'm going to chop, and then I am going to find a third. And here I might want to guess with my fingers. I can see that that's too wide, that's too narrow. I need something about in the middle. I'm going to push down. I'm going to go ahead and cut there too. These do not need to be perfect pieces. I'm going to roll these up, and if I see that one has a little bit more than the other, I might pinch a little off and add it to it. And I am making my spheres. These do not need to be perfect yet. I am going to add lots of things to them. Remember, we're not trying to make the art yet. We're just trying to dye our clay. So once you have 6 spheres, we want to poke our thumb inside, almost like we're going to make a pinch pot. And we are going to create a little hole to add in our dye. Now, today we are going to be using our 3 primary colors, which, if you remember, are the colors that make up all other colors that we see. So, we are going to do some color mixing using these 3 colors. In each one, I'm going to poke a hole into the center. For this next step, if you do not want your hands to get covered in color, I would suggest that you find some gloves, or you mix this in a bowl using a spoon and not your hands. But if you know anything about Miss Deck, I'm not afraid to make a mess. So I've left some of my white clay aside because I might want white later, or I might want to try to make a new color. And I have 6 pieces that I'm going to make different colors. I don't need my colors to be very strong, so I'm going to start by adding 2 drops of color. I'm closing it every single time I use it because I don't want it to fall over and spill. How am I doing this? I'm pulling it apart, I'm folding it in half. All the color is still sandwiched inside. Pulling it apart, folding it in half. I'm trying not to touch any of the dye that's on the inside yet because I want some of it to be absorbed into the clay first. So I'm folding it in half, pushing it down. You can see it's kind of flat. Fold it in half. Push it out, flatten it, fold it in half the other direction. And I'm just going to keep repeating this until I see a lot of that color has made its way into the clay. And I'm going to start to go ahead and mix with my whole hand. I would suggest when you're doing this that you start with your lightest colors. You don't want to start with a color like blue. Maybe start with yellow. Red is okay. It's not as strong, but if you're going for colors like purple or green or blue, you want to be careful because it will stain your hands. And if you stain your hands already, before you get to colors like yellow, it's going to make a bigger mess. So if you notice that it starts to get kind of sticky at this point, that's okay. It's because you've introduced some new moisture into the clay that wasn't there before. So if it seems like it's too sticky to work with, one thing you can do is you can add a little bit more baking soda. Just be careful not to add too much too fast. That's right, I said baking soda, not baking powder. Make sure you have the right one. So that looks pretty mixed to me. I'm pretty happy with the color. I don't want to make it much darker than this, so I'm going to go ahead and set that one aside, and we'll go ahead and try the rest of these. So, as you can see here, I have added in all my colors, and I have made all colors that we usually see in our color wheel. So, for starters, we made some red, and what I'm doing here is I am adding just a little bit more baking soda into each of these. Not a lot, just enough to pick up some of that stickiness that we gained from adding the moisture in. So I can tell this when the Play-Doh sticks to me that it's too sticky. If it sticks to itself, then you don't need to add any more baking soda. But if you notice that it starts to kind of fall apart and become brittle and flaky, then that's either telling you A, it's gotten a little bit too dry and you need to go ahead and use it, or it's telling you that you need to add just a pinch more water into the mix. So I am going back in and I'm just adding a little bit more baking soda, and then I can decide whatever I want to make with my beautiful colored clay. Now, this might dry a little bit differently. You might notice that some of the colors yellow a little bit, but that's okay. This is pretty awesome considering we're doing it at home. So let's talk about how each one of these colors was made. You can do this a little bit faster than I did if you only make 3 colors. You can start with your red, yellow, and blue, because from there you're going to make your secondary colors, which are orange, green, and purple. If you remember back to that color wheel video that we watched, you will remember that each one of these 2 primaries make a secondary color. So in this case, red and yellow make orange, yellow and blue make green, and blue and red make purple. So if you want to go ahead and try to make these 3 colors and then pinch off pieces to make these colors, you can try it that way. I just wanted to show you that I can take those 3 colors and make all of these ones as well. So by mixing the colors red and yellow, I can make the secondary color orange. By mixing the colors red and blue, I can make purple, and yellow and blue make green. But if I want, I can use my different color food coloring to make those individual colors if I decide I don't want all of these colors. So I think for this one I added 2 red, 2 blue, 2 yellow. For my orange I used 2 yellow and 1 red. For my green I used 2 yellow and 1 blue. And the reason I'm using 2 yellow is because yellow is not as intense of a color as blue or red is. And lastly, for purple, I used 1 drop of blue and 2 drops of red. So I hope that you enjoy making this clay, and I really hope to see what you make of it.